Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Your hosts. Hey guys, welcome to episode 164 of The Team House. I'm Jack Murphy here with Dave Park. We got D producing, and our guest on the show is Louis Saillans. He is a veteran of Marines Commando, which is sort of the French equivalent of Navy SEALs. I hate to make a direct comparison, but it's the French equivalent of Naval Special Warfare. Louis served 10 years in French Special Operations. Before that, he was a pilot in the Air Force, multiple deployments to Africa and to the Middle East, as well as other deployments around the world, non-combat deployments. And he is also an author. He has a book out. Actually, you can find the book. It's in French, but you can find the link down in the description to the Amazon page where you can pick that up if you're interested. Louis, thank you for joining us on the show at this late hour where you live.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be on the show. And it's the first time I'm introducing my French book to an English-speaking audience, so it's a bit of an experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I hope that this interview convinces people that this is, or convinces a publisher somewhere out there that this is a worthwhile book to translate into the English language and kind of bring to the English-speaking world. But here on the Team House, we really like to talk to our partner forces, our allied special operations partners around the world. We've talked to people from Denmark, the Philippines, Australia, a number of different places. There's so many allies that we haven't had on the show yet.
Ohio.
We need to. Ohio. But we're really excited to get this sort of unique perspective from you, Louis. And as usual, I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a little bit about, your background and how you grew up, what your upbringing was like, and what that path was that took you towards French military service.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the southwest of France. I grew up in I was going to say a middle-class family, but it was a family that struggled to stay middle class. So I was in between low class and middle class, but I never lacked anything really during my education. I feel times were sometimes hard, but I went through fine. I did a normal school. My school itinerary was kind of normal. I was never a very good pupil, I think, but things went okay. I was good at sports, good at languages, and I was rubbish more or less at all the rest. But since I think I was a nice kid. The teachers tolerated that, so that went okay. And eventually, I went into high school and I studied physics because I intended in becoming a physics teacher at first. I had no military family. No one in my friends or family were from the military, and it's something I never thought of doing. It came to me at some stage during my physics classes, I think. I felt I liked physics. I liked the world of physics, but something I hated was just sitting at a desk, just like what we're doing now, but just with copies to learn, lessons to learn and stuff. It was just not my thing. So I kind of got bored, and eventually I decided I had to go into something more active. And so that's how the military came out. Well, my first encounter with the military was me going at the weekends. I used to go to university, and then in the evenings and at the weekends, I used to work in a fast food. And with that money, I went to an air club, and I learned to fly small aircrafts there. And there, the instructor that actually taught me how to fly, he was a professional military pilot, and he flew combat helicopters. and he's kind of So he was my first encounter with the army, and he kind of pushed me, nudged me to go into that direction, and that kind of opened the door to me. And I after some time, I settled with the idea of going into the military, and I said, why not try that out? And so that's how I got into the Air Force. So the first army I went into, I enlisted in the Air Force as a student pilot, an officer cadet. I don't know how you call them in the USA.
Yeah, like a cadet. Yeah.
Cadet, yeah, that would be it. And so I did that for 3 years. I got my diplomas to become a professional military pilot. I didn't get them all, obviously, because it's a long course. But I had all the ones that was equivalent to a professional pilot in the civilian world. So I didn't fly any armed planes, like I didn't drop any bombs or anything, but I knew how to fly a plane basically. And from there, again, I felt this was interesting. I spent 3 years. It was absolutely thrilling. I learned a lot. It taught me a lot of discipline. Flying an aircraft was a bit of a big deal for me. I was just maybe 20 years old, so still a kid. And so it taught me a lot of things, and I learned how to become a soldier, really, and that was thrilling. And after a while, I remember this one flight. I remember this one flight with one of my instructors, and it was a very long flight. It was a 3-hour long flight, and although I was a pilot, I was in command. I remember kind of dozing off during my flight because it was IFR, so he couldn't look outside. It was all dark, and I remember just going, "Oh, I'm falling asleep here," and that kind of rang the bell. It opened up a sequence in my head saying, "Is this, the exact thing you wanted to do? Like, is this going where you want to be later on? Can you project yourself in 30 years doing what you're doing now?" Although I knew I was at the beginning, I'd still loads of stuff to learn, and I was just at the very beginning of this. And so that kind of, it got me. It opened a thinking process in the background of my head for a bit, and then eventually one day I saw on the airfield I was on. It's the Air Force. It was an Air Force, big Air Force airfield. Paratroopers came in, and they did a whole week where they did all their jumps for the year to validate their qualifications and stuff, get them up to date. And very kindly, they came over to us and said, we know we're in a learning process, guys. So if you want to, come hang out with us, and we'll show you the gear and give you a bit of a change.
Got another one.
It was a bit like that. Yeah, bit of a trap. And so, of course, I was all over the place. This is fantastic. So I went to see the guys, and they told me about all this. And eventually, the pilots came to see us and said, "Listen, guys, we're doing jumps all week. So if any of you want to come and hang out with us and stay in the cockpit during the jumps, in between your flights, feel free." So next thing you know, I was in the cockpit with the guys. They were flying the plane, and I was just observing what was going on. And eventually, I go at the back at the cargo, and I see all those guys geared up with the helmets, with all the stuff, the NVGs, the guns everywhere, the chutes, and I remember thinking, there's this awkward silence at the back. Like, it was very noisy. There was noise of the engine, and eventually the ramp drops open, and there's the wind whirling, and it's cold. But the guys were they looked very calm. They looked very confident. Even this guy that was lying down on that box and that was about to be pushed off the aircraft. So I was thinking, there's something weird about this, and very intriguing, and also very attractive. If you see what I mean, you kind of feel you're I felt I was in the middle of a clan, a group or something, and I felt the bond. I felt the confidence they had. They were checking each other's gear, so I could see they were very loyal to each other and stuff. They were very confident in each other, and it kind of all sounded like very attractive to me. And eventually I said, right, no, this is it. That's what I want to do. I want to jump off that plane. I want to be with them. So, that's how I got to get my mind around switching armies and going from flying aircrafts to basic training in the Navy to get into the Commandos.
What was it? First off, can you kind of explain how the French military is structured for us, and then tell us why you chose the Navy and the Commandos?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the French army is divided into three big main armies, which is, of course, the army, or what you call the army, or we can call ground army, l'armée de terre. So they lead all the land operations. Then we have the Air Force and the Navy. So that's kind of a classic three branches. And then we have the National Guard. That's what we call the gendarmerie. So they're kind of military police, and they deal with frontier work, and they do also policing. So they actually, in town, we have police units. And in the countryside, it's the gendarmerie that acts. So they're actually military guys, and they do policing in the countryside. Well, so they're actually four. So there are four great branches in the military. And I was in the Air Force, and I wanted absolutely to switch to the Navy. Well, absolutely, I felt I had to go into these Navy commandos. I don't know why, because in every branch has their own special forces units. So Air Force also has, just like the Americans, the pararescue. It's the exact same. Then the Navy have Navy Special Warfare, and of course the Army has all the Rangers and the equivalent in the French military. And I felt I had to switch to the Navy because at the time there was this TV show going on showing those French Navy SEALs being trained, and they had there was this one very charismatic guy who was one of the instructors, and he's very famous now. He wrote another book in France, and he's very famous. But also, he was the only one you got to know when you were interested in special forces. So you hit special forces on the internet, or you wanted to, although there wasn't very much of internet at the time. This was 2007 or 2010 maybe. The only thing you got information from was this training of Navy commandos. So I didn't really know about pararescue or Rangers or anything else. And also, the rumor, because that's all the intel I had was rumors, was that the training course was extremely hard, and it was probably one of the hardest in the army that you could go through. And that I knew nothing about this, and I was like, I knew no one from Spec Ops, I knew no one from the Navy, and so I just said, right, sounds hard, and I just feel I have to go through this, so at least I can confront myself to my decision, and whether I get through or I break my teeth on this, at least my conscience is clear. I know where I've been. And Mike Horn, the famous adventurer Mike Horn, the guy from South Africa. Do you know about this guy?
No, I'm not familiar.
Not offhand, no.
Not familiar. But anyway, he went around Antarctica by foot. So he did that by foot, and he went against all the winds and tides, and all. And when people asked, they said, "Why did you go against and not with the winds and tide?" And he just said, "If I did it in the right way with the winds and tide, all my life, I would have wondered whether I would have managed to do it the other way around, the hard way, basically.
Yeah.
It was kind of the same idea here. I was going, right, this sounds hard. I could go in I could just, enlist in any regiment in the army and just go, right, I want to do infantry stuff. Eventually be a para something, I don't know what, or I want to do the same thing as these guys were doing. The guys, I eventually got to know what the unit I was with, because at the time I didn't know who I was with in the cargo of that plane. And I discovered later they were GCPs, so it was kind of, kind of elite soldiers in parachutist regiments. And so I was like, I could very well go there.
Mm-hmm.
But since I heard about this training for Navy commandos, I was like, all right, I'll go and break my teeth on this first, and then we'll see. But I won't go through this, so why not? So that was a bit of the origin of my decision, and that was one of the first one of my first let's say big accomplishments, was not only taking the decision, but also having to go across one of the worst enemies I ever went across in my life, which is the French administration. And that was a big of a deal because I had to go from the Air Force to the Navy, and there is nothing scheduled for that. Nothing's made. There's no pathway for that, because you're trained to be a pilot. People are investing in you to become a pilot, and so they expect you to to go from A to Z in your training. But when you come out in the middle, there's no one that's going to tell you, oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll help you to go elsewhere. So I discovered how you can bribe colonels with cognac and all kind of drinks, and eventually you get your way through. And so I ended up in the Navy.
So you didn't even have to finish like your full term in the Air Force. You were able to transfer in your service.
I finished the equivalency of my diplomas in the civilian in the civilian world. So which meant if I dropped out, I still had my diplomas to I could become an airline pilot after this. I could immediately switch to airline pilot because I already had all my diplomas. Okay, so I knew I had this done. That was my milestone, and from there I could switch to the Air Force, to the Navy. Sorry.
So let's talk a little bit about your initial journey into the Navy and making it over to selection, and a little bit about what that. I'm sure that was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it's a bit of a. Yeah, it's a hard experience, as you know. It's something where you discover yourself mostly. You discover who you really are. That's how I see it. I ended up in the Navy, and I did basic training in the Navy to become we have the equivalent of infantrymen. It's like Marines, basically it's like Marines in the Navy. So they're infantrymen, that work for the Navy. They keep the ships. They're the one deployed with the ships. And so I went through the basic training with them. And that went well because I was well trained before in the Air Force. I prepared everything. There's one thing I learned from the Air Force is how to do proper briefing, and that was the only way I knew how to plan things out, was to do a briefing that was extensive enough so that I could anticipate as many cases as possible and as many situations. So I knew I was switching for the Air Force to the Navy. I knew it was going to be rough because I was going to go into basic training. And so I trained. I used to fly, and back from the flight, I used to go running, or I used to go to the gym or work out. So I had this, double schedule every week. And so basic training was okay. Well, it was hard, obviously, because I also physically, it was I think I was okay, but mentally and psychologically, it was hard because there's a lot of learning to take in because it's basically learning infantry and it's learning how to use your guns and grenades and how does a group maneuver and all kind of stuff. And so that was 6 months, maybe less 4 months, and then I went directly into the training. Although you could volunteer directly after your this 4 months basic training to go directly for the commando integration course. And so that's where things kind of got very, very rough. So that was scheduled as follows. You have 4 weeks of selection. And these are, that's the hardest part. It's really extremely hard. It's a bit like Hell Week in the SEALs. I know they talk about it all the time, but it's a bit the same. So it's 4 weeks where you have sleep deprivation. You're wet all the time. You've only have a few minutes to eat cold meals, and you're walking all night with big bags and rucksacks. I suppose it sounds kind of. I know on this channel it sounds kind of routine. But
well, it's similar to the selection course that we all go through. It's a commonality, right, across these different nations. They put you under some stress to see what you can handle,
a scooch of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I thought it was quite brutal because I remember having psychological issues after that. I remember not being able to. We were wet all the time, like we're. Physically, they made sure we had no moments dry. Like weekends were very cut up because we had to stand guard on our buildings, on our training buildings. So stand guard day and night. So as the course goes on, the numbers dwindle. Mm-hmm. So you end up being very small numbers, but there are still 24 hours in the day. So you just have to split that up. The pieces of cake you have to split up, become bigger and bigger as the group number diminishes. So the weekends we spend standing guard, and when we're not standing guard, you can take time off, and you can leave the base just for the one washing machine. But that's it. So it's kind of harsh for the 4 weeks, and after that. It kind of the training becomes a bit more technical, so you learn all the guerrilla tactiques and all, and that's 2 of the months after that. And at the end of that, you get your beret, your green beret. So that's 3 months all in all, and then you go into commando. An operational commando unit. Mm-hmm.
During your training process, what else does those 3 months consist of? I mean, are you learning underwater demolitions, diving? No.
No. It's very oriented on guerrilla warfare,
mm-hmm.
Land and nautical warfare. So we don't do any diving at all. We at the end of the training, at the end of the 3 months. We do an extra month of parachute training. So we learn how to do parachuting, and then you've extra courses that add on later on, like demolition, or mm-hmm. We do a bit of demolition. We do a bit of all during the 2 months of training, but just a bit of all, a bit of shooting, a bit of guerrilla tactics. Bit of demolition, but no underwater.
Okay. They have you working with the Zodiacs?
Yeah, exactly. It's more of Zodiacs and nighttime raids, mm-hmm. and helo raids and voilà.
Very cool. Louis, I got to take just a minute here to give a shout out to the sponsor of our show. It's Bubs Naturals. Bubs is a company that works with the Glenn Doherty Foundation, who was a Navy SEAL, a really good guy who sadly died in Benghazi, Libya, when the CIA annex was overrun. But Bubs makes a number of health food products that they continue to work with the foundation. I've used this protein for many years.
I love the MCT. I mean, everything's great, but the MCT powder's fantastic.
This is a new product they have, these gummies, apple cider vinegar, which I promise they don't taste like vinegar. They taste like normal gummies.
They're delicious.
Help with your digestion. And the protein is interesting because it's flavorless, completely flavorless. You mix it in with coffee, soft drink, whatever you want. And so you go to bubsnaturals.com, use the promo code TEAMHOUSE, and you'll get 20% off your order. So that's bubsnaturals.com. Use the code TEAMHOUSE to get 20% off your first order. We're really happy to support this company and work with them. So go check those guys out, please. All right, thank you, Louis.
No problem.
Which operational detachment are you assigned to? And actually, we should take a little pause here, I think, to talk a little bit about the history of your unit. If we could get into that a little bit, to give people an idea of where these guys came from, what their origins are, and sort of what their mission is.
Yeah. The French Commandos in the Navy, you can break them up in 5 main units, actually, and they all bear the name of a deceased commando that either died during Indochina or in Africa. So the 4, they all have 4 very famous French famous names. Sorry, so there's Montfort, Trépel, Jobert, Pinfantignaud, and Hubert. And they all used to have a very specific application. So Montfort used to be demolition and mortars and long-range shooting. So that would be their specialty. Trépel and Jobert would be kind of the same. They'd be assaulters. And Pinfantignaud would be recce. So they'd go in for reconnaissance techniques. And then you have Hubert, and they do all the subaquatic warfare. Is that correct?
Subaquatic? Subsurface. Yeah,
subsurface, yeah. So they were specialized in subsurface. So now we kind of have mixed them all up because of the operational needs. Mm-hmm. We have so much need of human resources on the battlefields that we kind of had to mix everyone up and say, we all do a bit of all now because we couldn't afford having, just 2 units deployed at the time. So now they all deploy at the same time. Well, one after the other, but we have to have them.
They all got sucked into counterterrorism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they try and still keep a bit of a specialty in each one of them, especially in Hubert, since they are the only ones that do subsurface actions. But all in all, we kind of mixed now, and we kind of do a bit of all in every unit. Although each unit is still independent from the others.
And
then we've.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We've 2 extra units that have added on with years. That are Kiefer and Pusha. And Kiefer and Pusha are 2 units that one of them is for all the vectors. So either parachutes or ships, ribs, all that kind of stuff. And Kiefer is a unit that it's a pool of specialists. So all the K9, electronic warfare, all these guys will regroup in Kiefer, and so we'll go and grab one of them for a specific mission or whatever. That's how it works.
And which one were you assigned to?
So I did time in Trépel and Jobert, and they're both assaulters commandos. Because I like banging doors in.
Yeah.
And what is the sort of the operational history of those 2 units, if you could tell?
They were created during the Indochina war that was in the 50s.
Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam. They used to be river units, and they used to be do raids. They used to have boats, big ribs, and they used to do raids all along the rivers that went into China to kill and capture basically units and overrun outposts, enemy outposts. So it was very early. They had acquired a bit of a commando style because it was they had to be fast, they had to be brutal in areas that were usually possessed by the enemy, or they were held by the enemy, and all the most of the knowledge the commando got from guerrilla warfare comes actually from the British, because all that warfare we used comes from the Second World War, where the French troops, when the German armies overran France, part of the French troops disengaged France and went to other allied countries, and some went to England, where they learned all the SAS techniques, and they brought them back to France at the end of the war. And from there, we kept these techniques, and we developed them and used them for Indochina War, Algerian War also.
Wasn't Jacques Cousteau involved in helping to set that unit up?
Well, Jacques Cousteau did a lot in subsurface activities, because he's actually the guy who invented the scuba.
The scuba system.
Scuba system. He invented the scuba system. So that was a major asset for divers. But I think the guys that were the most the leaders in the area of the subsurface warfare were the Italians.
Yeah.
Italians had fantastic
the mini
divers,
subs.
combat divers. Yeah, and I think we transferred some of the knowledge from the Italians also for the combat divers.
Fascinating.
And then you get there in 2010. Had these assault units already been deploying on the war on terror or other French military missions? What had they been up to?
I remember arriving at my unit. First big events that took place was a ceremony. So we all came out with our kits, our brand new kits, and I was lined up for the ceremony with my new unit. And the ceremony was for the arrival of the. Oh, I'm losing my English. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Of the coffin of one of the guys that had just deceased in Afghanistan, and his teammates were there, and they were also crippled. They were alive but crippled. And I remember my first ceremony was this coffin coming in. So I was barely arrived, and I was like facing with what was going to happen to us. So yeah, it was a bit of Afghanistan was a big thing for French units, and I remember all the change that involved because before Afghanistan we didn't have we had the odd mission here and there, but we didn't have things as intense as people could find them in Afghanistan. I didn't do it in Afghanistan, so these are stories I heard from, but I noticed a real change between the beginning of my time in the units and the end, where I remember training my first counterterrorism trainings, where we used to stack up against buildings when we had to clear rooms, and we throw the grenade, open the door, and we'd run in, and people would rush in to take angles. And I remember thinking, "Oh, this is rough," And when one of your senior NCOs would catch you thinking, he'd go, "Yeah, well, this is the real life, we know the real deal is the first guy, second guy that goes in, they'll probably die. So, but that's the deal." And I was kind of going, "Oh wow, that's really weird." I remember taking shots, with the training rounds, taking shots, and then hiding and then going, well, I can't go in. Like people are shooting at me, and my NCO is going, what the fuck are you talking about? Just push in, And
Right.
they kept saying push in, and I remember going, oh, this is rough. I don't get this. And eventually, with time and all these tactics moved around.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, the consequences of Afghanistan and the guys we lost. And I saw it in this room clearing, which is kind of the pinnacle of the counterterrorism units.
Yeah.
Is clearing rooms. I saw the difference, and at the end we started clearing the room from the outside.
Yeah.
And taking opening angles from the outside and all. And I saw the mindset totally changing between the beginning where we had to push all the time, and at the end where you'd stop yelling and you do things nice and slowly and take time and open up discreetly and try and be, and made a lot of sense. But then I was the new guy. I couldn't say anything, and that was perfectly okay. But I felt the change over time.
Yeah.
And eventually on deployments, I discovered also why you don't just run into a room with a guy waiting for you with a PKM.
Yeah, right. And
makes sense,
Yeah, and we've talked about that with people before too, because Jack and I both saw it also, where there, in the late '90s, like the hostage rescue model was the model that everybody was using, which is you're trying to save a hostage. So everybody you get all the guns in the room at the same time. Everybody dominates their point, and you collapse your vectors and this and that. But when there's no hostage and the bad guys knows that's your tactic and they set up bunkers in the rooms and other floors and everything else, people start to learn that lesson quickly, that maybe we should go back to World War II style clearing, where we clear the room from outside the building.
When
it makes a lot of sense.
I'm dating myself a little bit, but when I got to Ranger Battalion, it was 2003, and I think our CQB was still a lot of lessons learned from Somalia, from Mogadishu, and you're exactly as you described, Louis. Changed drastically, very quickly too, over a couple years. I don't want to get into too much detail about TTPs. Maybe they still use some of them, but a much more organic way of clearing structures. And as you point out, it became we accepted, I think, that there is an operational art to this, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just about kicking in the door, rushing in. You feel things out a little bit. Yeah. Take a little look-see.
If you can look through a window and shoot somebody from outside, then do that.
Yeah. If you can try the doorknob and the door opens and it's quiet, and maybe you just go in under night vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to blow every door down.
It makes a lot of sense, like in real life. Like if people shoot at you with the 7.62 rounds, it's bloody. I mean, I've seen people duck and dive for you're not standing up and holding your.
Yeah.
They used to say orient your plate carrier towards the guy.
Right.
I was like, what the hell?
Right.
Oh, I'm gonna duck and dive and move around. I'm not gonna stay there.
Right.
And so that it made sense in the end. But so that's a bit of an evolution I saw through time. But that was Afghanistan for me. It was this big change from doing stuff with a bit of everyone's ideas coming in, and still happens, which is fine. But then eventually having the roughness of reality come in and step in, and from there you're like, okay, all right, this is the real stuff. And this first ceremony for me was a bit of my eye opener, and saying, okay, this is not just this is just training, or everything they taught me in training is not just gobbledygook just to look good. No, this is real.
And what was it like when you showed up to your first maneuver element? I mean, if you could tell us a little bit about what that was. Is it a platoon? Is it a squad? What is the? It's a group. Okay.
Yeah. It's a group, and we're around 10 guys. A group is around 10 guys, and I was new guy in there, and it was rough. It was rough because it was the way it is. It's very strong hierarchies. I think they're mostly fair, but they are very rough. So you can't, you can't mess around, and it's the real deal. So
And
there's a lot of work.
they're all Afghanistan veterans.
Exactly, yeah. And all the guys were coming up with these Afghanistan stories, and I was with all the other new guys, and we were like, "Oh God, this is serious!" Like, what they tell us about the stories, they tell us like with, in a very non-important way sometimes, like saying they don't want to brag, and so they just come up with the story during an exercise or something. So, oh yeah, guys, remember this can happen because they happened to me, and when they say that, like our eyes light up, and we're like, ooh, this is the real deal. So it was kind of exciting also, and to have these guys around. But it was rough because they were expecting the best out of us, and in the end, after thinking, with time, I realized that 3 months of a selection and training process, plus a few extra training weeks after that, is very little for a commando, since there's a lot of knowledge to gather. There's a lot of things to update all the time, to train for. So yeah, days were long, and as a new guy, it's a bit of a big piece to bite. So
Was there a
So, yeah.
formal? I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
no. Oh yeah, you're going to ask, is there a formal way to
Yeah.
for people to come in? Yeah, there is, and you get a bit of a what's the word?
Like an indoctrination type of thing?
Yeah, and a bit of an indoc, yeah, and so you have to do maximum press ups, push ups, and they give you loads of stupid tasks, and kind of try and see where your limit is as a teammate. So that comes up very fast, and you've loads of physical and technical technical tests they put you through that are totally informal, and they do this after most of the senior NCO have left. The junior NCOs come over to us, and they give us extra tasks to do and extra tests to go through, like we call it the gun salad. It's where take
Yeah.
variety of guns and mix them up in a box and NVGs on, and here you go, trying to put them back together and all kind of stuff. So yeah,
Interesting.
there's a lot of that, and I feel also that has strongly diminished the intensity of it. Thought that was very rough, but it was tough. It was tough, but now it has diminished a lot since there's a very strong turnover in the units. Because of all the deployments to Africa, Middle East, and elsewhere, since people are deployed very often, there's a bit less of this indoc when people come in, because people don't have time to mess around with the new guys,
Right.
and we want the new guys not to be able to do this gun salad properly with NVGs, which makes little sense.
Right.
We want them to be able to go to the range more often and be able to be operational as soon as possible.
Right.
Because we need them on the field. We need them on the battlefield. So yeah, that kind of has diminished. And I think it's good. It's good because I believe in. Well, it's good and it's not good, of course, because it's good in the sense that it's good to be operational fast and to be professional fast. That I approve of. But then the indoc is also useful, I think, to create bonds before going to war. Having bonds with your teammates is something that's interesting, because it created a lot of bonds with the new guys. All the new guys we used to group together and help us out each other, and so that was very useful, and it helped a lot create bonds with each other that we still have today. So
Around what year was it that you arrived?
I arrived in the units in 2010, I think. Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah.
So was Afghanistan still very hot? I
Yeah.
know very hot, but you
Yeah.
okay.
Tell
But
us about.
Mali,
Go. Sorry.
the thing is, we were at the end of Afghanistan for France, and 3 years later, Mali opened, and Syria right afterwards. So there was an escalation as soon as Afghanistan closed. Boom, we had Mali open up with the very first missions to stop Taliban, not Taliban, jihadi guys get grip of the main country, of the main towns in Mali. So we had to intervene there, and then we had to intervene also in Syria with the Americans in 2015. Is that it? Can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
So voilà, so it all carried on, and so we kept gaining. We kept going forward, and it was a lucky time to be in the units really, because you got to deploy in good. It used to be good deployments. Like you used to get to see stuff and do stuff, which was very interesting.
Tell us about when you got the word came down of your first deployment. And how did you guys get situated? What was the train up like to get ready for that deployment, and then heading overseas for it?
Yeah. Well, we I know in the Navy Commandos we have a bit of an issue with deploying because we love doing extra training before we deploy, as more than anyone else. we have to train more than anyone else. Any other Spec Ops units, we have to do more. And so we would do a main training where we would do all the renewal, all the updates of all the qualifications we have, whether it's land nav, sea nav, or jumping or shooting or whatever it is, demolition, anything. We'd get everything up to top notch, and then we'd go for training, for extra training for the deployment. So that would be maybe 2 to 3 months beforehand, before the deployment. So we do training that's just only orientated to wherever we're going. So if we would work with helos on the deployment, we'd try and work with helos beforehand in the same way. We'd go for people, our instructors would set up scenarios that would look like what we're going to do, and so that would get us prepared for the area. And then we'd have a bit of a bit of leave, and then we'd deploy on the mission. And so we knew some missions were more dangerous than others, but we deployed all the same with the same preparation every time. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. So, yeah.
So whereabouts generally were you going on the first deployment, and what was the mission?
First deployments were Africa, and some of the missions, it was counterterrorism, but oriented to there was both counterterrorism and anti-piracy. So we did a bit of both. We're prepared for both. But then the most interesting ones were a couple of years later, where we deployed more into Sahel, and that was purely counterterrorism. And they were the most interesting to me because we're very lucky to get onto real combat missions where it was really rough, and we'd get we'd have proper orders and proper leaders that would push us into combat. That was really, really interesting.
Was the French public very aware of what was going on in the different parts of the world, and that you guys and other French elements were involved?
Yeah. People are quite aware because French people tend to have a special attention over Africa. Africa used to be half, maybe 1/3 or half of Africa used to be French, they used to be French colonies. So a lot of African people, a lot of African countries still speak French, and uh, so we still keep a lot of links with these people. And so whenever we get deployed over to Africa, people have a special, they yeah, they're interested to know what's going on. Whereas whatever's happening in Yemen, no one cares, or or elsewhere. So yeah, there's a special bond with Africa, and then Middle East also. People are interested in, they are aware because they're still close. It's kind of around the Mediterranean Sea, so I feel there's a sense of closeness on what's happening, and so yeah, people are kind of conscious, although uh, these recent wars weren't wars like what France has known in Algeria or Indochina, where we lost something like 50,000 or 70,000 men. Whereas here, like I remember in Mali, we lost 53 men, which is nothing like compared to these other conflicts, although they are very close in time to us. So there's also a kind of a sense of importance in the awareness they have of the conflict. Like, they know there's a conflict going on, but since there aren't very many people, very many French dying, it was the same in Afghanistan. Not very many. I think we lost something like 80 men or something. And so since there aren't very many people dying over there, well, French people dying, they're not. I think they're not very concerned about the conflict. Whereas Indochina and Algeria, that was massive. Like
Right.
everyone had someone from their family dying or being injured in Algeria and in Indochina.
And so tell us about that first deployment. What was it like for you? Were there any interesting operations that kind of stand out in your mind? Like maybe your first combat operation. I mean, you must remember.
Yeah, I remember very well, and I remember it was it was very rough. I remember the very first one. It stands out in my mind because it was a funny operation. We had intel coming in. We were on standby for to capture some guy, some jihadi leader somewhere, and so we were on standby with the team. And the guy, the intel came in and said, "Right, there's a bunch of guys with a few pickups resting beneath trees in the desert, and we would like to go. We would like you to go and check it out." So that's kind of a routine mission in Sahel and all these regions in Africa, and so you get to you just go and check on people, and often it's not very much because the way the jihadi guys you go after, the real hard ones are kind of scarce. There aren't very many. Most of them are just combatants, but they'll switch sides, they'll change jobs, they'll be a jihadi combatant for 6 months, then he'll go back to trafficking gold or something. So you often get these guys that are either trafficking something or are actually jihadi fighters. So we leave for that mission, and we had maybe an hour or two of a helo flight to go there. And I remember asking how many guys there are and if there are any weapons, which is the basic, questions that we ask before we leave. And the guy, I remember my CO saying, no, we don't know how many there are, and we don't know if there's any weapons. Just go there and we'll see. So that's kind of tricky because it's kind of exciting because you're like, right, anything could happen, everything could go sideways. So this is very exciting, but that's the exciting part. But the kind of the other part that's kind of concerning is that you haven't a clue what you're going to deal with. So you don't know if you're supposed to bring a rocket launcher or a grenade launcher or any demolition, or you don't know what to bring. And the problem is we have these helos we fly in French Army. We have these very special helos. They're very good for flying into mountains. At the top of mountains, they can go very high because they're very high quality suppressors at the front of the engine, so they compress the air very well. They hold records actually for flying at the top of mountains, but in the desert, it's a scam. It's a scam because the heat, the temperature is so high. They consume too much fuel, so they can't. They have a very low cargo, so that's an extra stress on us.
What
because,
is the helicopter? Is it the Lynx?
No, it's not the Lynx. It's a Puma.
Oh, Puma. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are different versions of them. I was on the very modern version with, gunners on the sides and stuff. But the guys would go like, it was I remember later on as a team leader with the same helos. I remember having to fight with the pilots to get that extra 5 kilos onto the cargo. And I remember in the team, we used to have to drop all the water we had.
Right.
Even in desert operations, we drop all the water we have just to get the extra commando on, the lightweight guy, the one that was 60 kilos. We'd get him on, and we'd drop a few mags in, a bit of water, and we'd get this extra guy on.
Oh my God.
So it was very complicated for us to get to know what gear we had to bring and how much we could bring, and so. Well, so for instance, I wouldn't bring when I became team leader later on. I would not use any machine gunners anymore because they were too heavy. Ammunition was too heavy, and also they were not precise enough. So I'd drop out all the machine gunnery and take only sharpshooters. So I'd have 2 sharpshooters in one group because I felt they were more useful and I could make more out of them than a machine gunner. Like a machine gunner can't clear a house. or I can. It can. And in a harsh way.
Right.
Whereas my sharpshooter, if he has a short gun, he can actually clear rooms if he has to. So it was a bit of a negotiation every time we left. So this went on for this mission. Negotiations. We didn't know what we were going after. So we didn't know what kind of gear we had to use. So we had the standard kit we'd always use with a few grenades, a bit of all. We'd leave, and I remember this was in full daylight, which was pretty unusual because we'd often use, of course, nighttime operations in helo because the drones would see things much clearer because of the heat contrasts, and also we'd have NVGs. The enemy wouldn't have any, or very little. So combat superiority would be for us at nighttime. But this mission was taking place at daytime because they just felt we had an enemy that was very volatile. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the guys at the sound of an engine, they'd pack up and leave and drop guys off during their pass, so we'd lose everything. At the end, there would be anyone left. So we had to act quick. So they decided to deploy us in daytime. So we all went onto the helo, and we didn't fast rope over the area. I remember before reaching the area, I try and listen at the comms and the aircraft, know what's going on. And I remember this the chattering going on and trying to realize how many guys there were. And at the beginning, I thought it was something like 3 or 5 guys. But then at some stage, I hear 3 or 5 guys, 1 or 2 pickups, 1 or 2 technicals. And I hear motorbikes leaving the area. I hear guys running off the area. And I'm like, how many guys are there? Like people, there are people everywhere. In my comms, I only had to figure what was going on because I couldn't see. So in my comms, I was like, that's a lot of people, running around. And this was a drone transmitting all the information to us on the helo. And maybe 3 minutes before landing, I start to hear gun sounds in the comms, and I hear, and I'll see this afterwards, because afterwards I took up the footage from the helos to see what was going on, and there was this scene I'll remember all my life. I saw a Rambo scene in real life. We had, what would usually happen with the helos is that with the transport helos we were in would be preceded by the Tiger helo, which is the equivalent of the Apache, maybe, yeah. And so he had all the missiles and rockets, and he'd especially have this 30mm gun that's linked with the helmet of the pilot and stuff. And so he was starting to shoot at people downstairs. And I remember his camera pictured this guy. He was shooting in the sand and in the bushes, so it was, makes a lot of dust. And I remember this guy popping out of the dust with a heavy machine gun, PKM, and the band that was dragging. He was dragging a long band of ammunition on the ground, and he just took the gun from the hip. He started shooting at the helicopter, legs wide open in the middle of nowhere, going everywhere to the helo. So that was kind of my first encounter with combat, with this guy Rambo running out and shooting at heels with PKM. So eventually, that guy got shot very fast, although he ran a bit because the pilots would shoot and they would do massive smoke area, loads of dust area, and so the guy would hide back in, and so the pilot would lose him, and so that took a bit of time to resolve. But eventually, so I was hearing this, I was going, oh, the stuff is going on, and so eventually I look out at the helo and I see the helicopter shooting at the ground. I'm like, all right, this is the real deal. But then also I'm thinking, it's fine. We'll land the helo, we'll have done the work, and we'll just have to, grab a few prisoners or whatever's left of pieces and bury them, and boom. And so I'm thinking, on one side I'm going, he's going to kill everyone. We're going to have no one to deal with. And on the other hand, I was going, at least he's dealing with the Rambo guy, which is fine by me.
Right.
And so eventually we hover around this big kind of forest, and we land nearby because we insisted on landing. We hate, my team used to hate fast roping. Fast roping is crap. I do not like it. It's fancy, it's good for the movies and stuff, but I like a good hard landing with the helo where you just walk off. That's the best thing ever. Anyway, so the guy nicely lands us near the forest, and he's supposed to land us. We told him, like on the briefing, we did a very fast briefing with the pilot, and he was told to land us behind this hill. There's a hill, a sandy hill, in between the forest and our landing zone. So at least we're covered, and we can climb up the hill and have, we can see what's going on in the forest, and we can shoot people if we have to and stuff. And I stick my head out of the helo to see what's going on, and I'm like, where's the hill? And I see the helo is starting to to hover and to incline to get the land. He's going into his landing movement, and I'm like, there's a problem. There is no hill. Like between the enemy area and the landing zone, there's just this very wide area with nothing to cover us. Like nothing. Like it's just sand and dust. And eventually I discovered why this happened. It's because when we briefed very fast on a piece of satellite picture. And the satellite picture, there was this shade a hill that wasn't a shade. It was just the ground that was a funny color, and we thought the funny color was a shade. So we were like, oh, well, we'll be safe behind a hill. No hill. and the pilot going, oh, this is the GPS point. That's perfect. I land them on the GPS point without, thinking
Right.
the enemy's right there. And
Right.
Anyway, so we're landing. It's too late to warn anyone. Don't drop us here. It's too dangerous. We're not right next to these guys. One of them was Rambo. Who knows? Maybe there are other Rambos in there. And so he drops us off. And I remember very well. He drops us off. We all walk out, and I'm like, this is fine. It'll do. And I can see the forest ahead of us. It's maybe maybe 500 meters away. And I can't see anyone because it's dark. You know the way in the distance, beneath the trees, you can't really see people because of the shadow, and you can hide in the shadow very easily. And so I kneel and wait for the dust to fall down from the helo. The helo leaves, and as soon as the helo leaves, massive gunfight. It starts shooting from the whole of the forest, lights up, and we're all pinned down.
In the
We're
open.
all lying down for our lives in the middle of this no man's land, and they're just shooting at us, and we're like, there's nothing to do. Like there's nowhere to hide, and I'm like checking around people, and people are looking back at me going, "What the? Where do we go?" And so eventually we just think, if we're gonna die here, we may as well die running or doing something. So eventually we step up with a few NCOs, step up, and we start rushing to the forest, to the extreme end of the forest. So not facing us, but the extreme end on the side. Thinking if we reach the forest, at least, we're hidden into it, and at least they can't see us. So they can still shoot at us, but they won't be able to see us anymore. So we run across these 400 meters. It was the longest 400 meters I ever run in my life. And we get into the forest, and that's where it got really, really complicated, because it was a very bushy forest. So you couldn't see further than maybe 3 to 5 meters. And we knew there were people waiting for us, and there were numerous fighters in the forest, and I could hear the chatter on the radio, and I could hear that the helo couldn't see the guys because of the heat contrast that was not strong enough, since it was daylight.
Right.
It was like, I can see heat spots everywhere, but I'm not sure. I don't know what it is. And he wasn't going to shoot every heat spot he saw, because, he has that much of ammunition, and also we're here, and, things are going to get complicated if he runs out of ammo. And so we start, we gather all around as a group, which kind of gather around the end of the forest, and we say, right, this is, classical infantry work. We're going to line up, and just so that the helo knows that the line is us, and then we're just going to move forwards. And that's what happened. We just moved forward. It was the most stressful hunting party I've ever been to. There were people everywhere shooting at us, hiding. It was so yeah. I got face-to-face encounters with guys. I came up onto guys like that. It was that rough.
Like you guys, your group was bounding forward towards this tree line.
Yeah, we're just bounding forwards. We're going fast. We said, right, we're having a fast pace at this, because we're not just, we're trained for it. We know how to do this. We know we should check. We're not going to call each other saying, oh yeah, I'm ready. Can you come? No. We're going to check each other very fast, and then we're just going to move very fast, because we don't know what's ahead of us. And I don't want people ahead of me maneuvering faster than I am. So I'm going to maneuver fast so that I can cut into the maneuver, whatever they're doing, because they know we're here. And so eventually we start kind of, walking very fast into the forest and bouncing from tree to tree, from bush to bush. And I remember this moment where, we start seeing our first dead people, and I remember crossing these dead guys. eventually, we get to this point where one of my teammates, we regroup to clear a small area, maybe 10 square feet, maybe a little more. And so we get into the area and we get pinned down by these two guys hiding in a kind of a hole behind a bush, very, very dense bush. So we couldn't see them. We couldn't see. I just saw the smoke and the fire, but I couldn't see where they were. So we all started shooting at the same area. And I remember very clearly the helo saying, I am drifting right above you. So the helo was in this special maneuver where he's not driving forwards like this where the way you usually see them. He was tilted sideways and drifting like this. And he was doing that so that he was as slow as possible, as stable as possible, and he was actually going as slow as possible so that he could help us as much as possible. And these guys did an absolutely fantastic job because they were actually exposing themselves a lot by doing so. And I remember this guy saying, "We're right above you. Call us out. We're ready right now. Call us." And we were being shot at, and we didn't know where the shots were coming from. We could just see it was kind of this area. We weren't sure, so we were shooting everywhere. And so I remember calling into the radio saying, "Okay, we're good. You can shoot." And just calling my two teammates that were nearby, telling them just to move out because we were. I know that we weren't very far because I saw the footage of this afterwards. We're 10 meters away from these guys. And the danger close for the rounds are 70 meters. And so we were I kind of called in the shot, and I was like, did I do the right thing? As soon as I hang up, I'm like, is this going to fall onto us? And so he shoots the hole where the guys were in, and eventually that gets them, more or less, I suppose. Went up, flicking a few grenades in, and then moving around, so we get to see the hole. And so the guys were in pieces, but it was a bit of a stress, and we carried on like that for all in all, it was maybe a kilometer long or 800 meters long, and it was really, really stressful. And in the end, there were like over 20 fighters.
Holy shit!
And you guys went in with 10 or less?
No, we were 30. We were 30. We were 30 guys.
30. Okay.
We were 30 guys. But like I remember, we were just my team in the forest because some of the guys raced off as we were.
So they went after the other group.
Some went off, and so other guys had to go off and leave. And so to the point where I didn't have any soldiers at the end. We didn't have any teammates. We didn't have enough teammates. So I had the guys from the helo, from another helo, come in, drop the sharpshooter that was in the helo out, and come and help us out because we didn't have enough guys to deal with all the fighters we had ahead of us. So yeah, it was pretty rough. And I remember anyway, so there you go.
No, you mentioned that it was too hot. They couldn't get a temperature differential for the FLIR, for the infrared. How hot was it when you guys
It was around 40 degrees.
Around 40 degrees.
Celsius.
So about 104 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and that's very close. That's very close to body temperature. Body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. So 3 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
When you're hiding in a bush.
Yeah.
You can't really tell.
And were you guys out there with no water?
Yeah, no water.
Oh my gosh.
Like we couldn't afford it. It was too far out. It was like But then it went fine because the helos, came in and out, and after that we had to deal with all the aftermath. So we had to do the battle, the BDA.
BDA,
battle, yeah.
Like search all the bodies for intelligence and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that took us another 24 hours, no, 12 hours, something like that. And all in all, we spent 24 hours on the area. So it was a long day, and helos kept coming in and out. So you dropped us off a few packs of water, so it's fine. But it was a bit of an experience, and it was good fun though. We lost no one, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I still don't know how it happened, but I remember getting this one guy. He was actually ambushing another teammate. Like I remember moving around a bush and seeing. This is the funny part. I I remember going around a bush, and another of my teammates was on the left, and he was going to face that very bush I was cornering. I just check the bush and move on, and then something goes. There's a light that flicks on in my head, and I'm like, the bush had something weird in it, and there was a surface that wasn't right. And I remember going, there was a round surface in the bush, and there are spiky bushes with no leaves, just spikes, and like there's something round in the spikes. It was wrong, and then I came back a few steps, and I'm like, that's an ass. I could see the ass of this guy sticking out at the back of the bush, and I remember going, you can't see me. So I just walked up to him and I shot. I didn't shoot his ass, but I shot beneath the ass so that you could feel the bullets flicking the sand onto his ass. So he just turned around very slowly and he dropped the AK. But I remember my teammate was just going to face him, and he was waiting for my teammate.
Shit.
So yeah, that was lucky. So that was how lucky we were.
So yeah, you took the ass man prisoner.
Yeah. It's a big guy. I remember taking him. I'm like, ooh, you're a big guy. And eventually he turned out to be the kind of team leader for the guys, because all the other guys were either much younger or much skinnier, and he was kind of thick. And it was a big guy with a nice watch and stuff. And so he got he was. You can do tactical questioning.
Yeah, TQ.
Yeah. So he got a bit of that.
So how did you guys manage EPWs during this live firefight? These prisoners. How did you manage them during because you're still moving through the objective?
That was a bit of an issue. Yeah. Well, I had to drop people off. I had to drop guys off. Like as we were moving forwards, like if two guys surrendered, we'd have to go. You're staying with them.
Yeah.
One guy had to stay with them.
Yeah.
So at the end, I remember one guy. He was surveilling like 7 guys.
Holy shit!
He was with his gun, scanning 7 guys lying, 7 adult males on the floor with his gun. And I think since they had their we call it a puke. No, it's a prisoner under control set. Kit.
Yeah, puck. Yeah.
Puck, yeah.
Yeah.
They all had their puck on, so they didn't know there was only one guy looking after the 7 of them. So it was lucky. So we're lucky one of them didn't take it off and go, oh, there's only this small guy looking after us. But so it was very tricky, and we actually stopped the action because we didn't. I remember clearing bushes were 2 of us at the end.
Yeah,
right.
And I'm like,
right,
dude. I was telling the other guy like, we got to stop. Like,
we got to
clear the whole of Africa here.
Right, reconsolidate.
Yeah, we had to regroup and reconsolidate and reorganize ourselves because, the way in the desert, there are people everywhere. Like sometimes, I don't know if you've had that feeling already, but like sometimes you feel the desert is absolutely empty. And when you stop in an area for a bit, and like when you're on a recce mission or something, you end up discovering like there are people everywhere.
Yeah.
Like there are kids coming out of bushes, and this guy walking around with a plastic bag in the middle of nowhere in flip flops, and that was kind of the situation. Like we cleared our area, and we could still see guys over there, like, and we didn't know whether they were jihadi combatants like leaving the area or villagers from a nearby area coming in because they heard the sound and they saw the helos and they were just curious to see. So you kind of I remember it often happened on several occasions. We kind of had to stop and say, right, they're not with the situation, because that's what guerrilla fighters do. They mix with the population.
Right. Right.
So they just, they at some stage they just dilute themselves in the population. So you need to set a barrier to know where you stop, and you end up violating families' homes and making them prisoners, and
Right.
you're like, what am I doing? Like, these people have nothing to do with what we're dealing with.
Right.
So it's kind of
And everybody
Right.
owns an AK, and so if somebody comes outside their
Yeah.
house with an AK, it's like, are they just coming out? Are they
Right.
coming out to join the fight, or are they just trying to see what's going on?
yeah, exactly. So sometimes
Yeah.
it's kind of. But I remember saying, it's not that. I think I was in an adrenaline rush, and I was very excited, like for having survived up to now, and all the gunfighting and stuff. So I was like my teammate. My teammate was hyped. He was like, he wanted to clear the rest of the whole fucking area, and I was like, yeah, I want to too, but we're just the two of us, man.
Right.
If we fall on anyone else, like,
We already
it's gonna
saw what
go-
happens to Rambo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So this
I-
first mission was pretty eventful, to say the least.
Yeah. But it
Yeah.
was the first. This was the first really eventful mission. Like, we had a few missions before, but it was, no massive gunfight or anything. It was,
Right.
And was looks like we may have lost Louis. We'll see if he jumps back in. Probably just a little glitch with the internet connection. But folks out there, thanks for joining us today. And if you want, you can like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're out on all this social media stuff. And down in the description, there's a link to our Patreon page if you want to get these episodes ad-free.
There's a ton of bonus content on our Patreon. Like, you guys pay our rent. We appreciate it. You buy us the booze, so hook some brothers up. Louis is
He'll have to dial back in a second. So next week, we're going to have Nicholas Moore on the show. He was, I believe, a 275 Ranger. Went up to platoon sergeant.
I haven't
or
read the
first
book
sergeant.
yet. I'll
Yeah.
read by them.
Yeah, had a pretty extensive career in the Ranger Regiment. So we'll have him on next week. And then we got an extra episode coming up in October with James Laporta, who's a investigative journalist with the Associated Press. Louis.
and I'm back.
All right,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
I don't know what happened.
Hey, technology. It's not so bad. So any other like highlights from that deployment that stand out in your mind?
Well, yeah, there was this. What I liked with my job. This is another mission I loved are the missions where we came in at night to get these guys in the houses and stuff. That was, or in their tents and stuff. I loved the way we could switch from either having to be ultra violent, like, and very aggressive, and in these other missions where we barely spoke during the mission, like everything was just, we communicated with attitude. It just moved around very swiftly in the houses and stuff. I remember this one time where we got into a house. And that's a great memory. We're looking for this this guy. He's an indicator. He's a we know it's a guy. He gives intelligence to this terrorist group, and we need to capture this guy because we know they're preparing. We got the intel that this guy is preparing to kidnap Europeans in the area. So we have to intervene and grab this guy beforehand. And we have these two buildings, and we're two teams on the job. So building A and B, it's in town, and we drive into town. We park the cars. We walk a few hundred meters in the darkness, and there's no word spoken. And I take building A with my team, and the other team takes building B. And we walk into this house when we get the green from Paris, and they tell us, okay, you can go in. So we step in, and what I loved was that we had a senior NCO that was he was linked with the CO. He was very experienced, but he was a bit of a bouncy guy. Like, he was very excited very, very, very easily. And I remember him being very hyped for the mission and kind of pushing us and kind of roaring, calling out orders very loudly. Whereas we were in the middle of a town, and I was like, in town, I'm not at ease because we had no helo. We had just one drone extremely high that couldn't see very much. No helos to stay discreet. And so I knew that if things had to go sideways, we're a small team, so we're not going to do very much. Like, we're not going to survive very long. So we're better off, like, not doing any sounds, not, real commando style, really. And I remember having this guy, and he was just annoying me because he was jumpy and he was moving. CEO was a great guy. CEO was a really calm guy, and everything was really easy and soft with him. But the NCO he was linked with, that was over us, that gave us orders, he was just a pain because he was moving around and very excited and stuff. I was like, calm down, this is going to go fine. We're just grabbing this guy and leaving. So anyway, he gives us the green, and like, he roars it. He goes, oh yeah, guys, we've got a green, and we're just outside the door.
Follow me, and you will survive.
Iron Mike.
Get to the chopper.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we've reached up to here, and we have had no radio conversation, like no radio exchange with the rest of the team, because we have this policy where we say, I used to be the radio guy in my team, and I know radio always works during training and before we leave, and as soon as we need them, not anymore, right? That's a classic. So I used to say, no comms. Comms only if there is a problem. So, call out people if there's a problem or if there's something you can't deal with at your level. And so I remember just before reaching the door, we left the guy in the alleyway. That was a bit of a there was a bit of a funny story also, because we had a sniper, two snipers covering the roofs, so they had to climb onto the roofs as we were walking to the door. These snipers had to walk to the roof, and there's this alley where we said right, we'd have to drop off the ladders in case the door wouldn't open, and so we'd have the ladders handy if we had to climb into the compound, etc., blah 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 blah. And I remember there was a bit of a race to leave the ladders, because the last one to leave the ladder would have to stand to stay posted in the alleyway, and that was the thing no one would want to, because everyone wanted to be in the house. Of course. Right. And so he was the last one. So there was a bit of a race, I remember, to leave the ladder and go stack up and not be the one at the end that had to stay in the alleyway. I'm saying this because the guy in the alleyway got eventually, during the operation, got two guys walk up to him in the middle of the night. This was a nighttime operation, so two guys walk up to him, and he eventually just pushed him away with his laser. He didn't even shout out at them. He just lasered them and said, I'm armed, I look dangerous, I am dangerous, just stay away. And he didn't even calm that. So he didn't even tell us what was going on because he just felt he was in control, and as long as he's in control, he's not interfering with the team leader and going to annoy the team leader saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm in control here, so don't worry."
Right.
Like from A to Z, if you're in control, then don't say anything. It's just if something goes sideways, then we need to know, and if shots are fired, we'll know because we'll hear them. So anyway, no comms, and we get to the door. He's stuck up at the door. NCO shouts out, and we walk in. And I love the way we walk into this place because we walk into the first area, and then we realize the whole of the family was lying outside in the compound.
Yeah.
In the
Courtyard.
Thank you very much. And we didn't have any other options than just walking over them. And so we actually, at first, I remember walking over them, and then turning around and working my NVGs and going, right, what did I walk over? And then eventually discovering there was a whole family there and they were still sleeping. And the whole team walked over them and they were still sleeping.
Oh my God.
And eventually we get round the courtyard to this other room, clear the area, clear the buildings. No one there, fine. Last building, the guy's there, we grab him. And I don't know how we managed to not make him cry or no one shouted or anything. And we grab him. And we left. And I remember my NCO having to calm down the MCO that was roaring in the comms that he had the jackpot and da-da-da-da-da. So eventually, we're like, yeah, we'll talk about this later. But just leave. And so we eventually leave. And I remember being the last guy to leave and walking over this family that was still asleep when we left.
So crazy, yeah.
And that was just fantastic. It was a great memory for me. It was like,
no one knew you were there.
Yeah.
No shots fired. It's good operation.
It's a perfect operation.
It was good fun, and we got the right guy.
Yeah.
Luckily, and we just left, and we had a bit of an encounter at the end on the exfil because we came in with civilian vehicles. And leaving, we came across the local army that didn't know we were there, and we didn't know they were there. So in the middle of the night, we came across these 10 technicals facing us. So that was a bit of a stress. Took us maybe a minute or two to figure out who was what. But at first, we all just burst out of the vehicles and we spread out onto the road, like ready to shoot. And so that was that was the most, that was really frightening for me because like the 50 cals were all aiming our way. I was like, ooh, if this goes sideways, it'll be rough and it'll be fast.
Yeah, and it's tough, because I'm imagining a lot of those places, the local forces, the official forces, are using the exact same types of vehicles that the bad guys are.
Same, yeah. The only thing, we only realized they weren't the same when we really got close to these guys and saw they had uniforms on. And from there, we're all right, okay, you're local army, fine. But until then, like, they're with technicals and they're, with the lights blaring your way, you can't really see. You can only see shadows move around the vehicles. And you're like, whoa. So,
yeah.
There's something you brought up that I wanted to follow up on, Louis. You said that you guys were up to the objective area and you had to get the green light from Paris, which is interesting. So there was the Special Ops Command in Paris had to bless off, like they had the final order before you were able to actually hit the target.
Yeah, because there was a special target since the guy was going to supposedly kidnap these European guys. We had intel from the French secret services that said, grab him now. And this is...
Interesting.
This is very important, grab him before he manages to carry on his deed. So, we had to wait for Paris. We often have to wait for Paris for guys, in Paris. We don't have very much maneuvering space. I know I've met a lot of Rangers, and the guys have a lot of wider span of actions they can do without having to wait for Washington to say yes or no. well, that in my point of view, whereas we have a lot of restrictions up to the door. We have to wait for parents to say yes. And stuff.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I understand that there has to be command and control, but to the point where it's like
Right.
you're on the
That-
door ready to
yeah.
breach. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Louis, I
leash.
just
Doesn't happen all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, once in a while you get this. Yeah.
That's got to be frustrating as an operator on the ground. Like you're in a village, and I think for people who might not be familiar with this scenario, is that villages can come alive, and
yeah.
you can get like swarmed from all sides once they become like if it's 3 a.m. and you're sneaking up on target and that call to prayer goes off, like it's going to be a bad night.
Oh yeah. I remember one of my NCOs when I came into the teams. He told me about the story in Somalia. The guy was escorting a Legion convoy. They had these they weren't tanks, but they were troop transport vehicles, armored troop transport vehicles. And so he was on one of them with a Legion team, and one of his mates, another commando, he was on another vehicle ahead of him. And they arrived they were on dirt roads, and they arrived on the roundabout, and engaging in the roundabout, the first vehicle went round and to the left or ahead, I can't remember. And he went around and he crushed on its way. The vehicle crushed one of the local vehicles, and it crushed. It basically drove onto the whole of the back of the body of the car. The driver was safe, was okay, was untouched, but the car was smashed. And the roundabout was very large. It was a very large roundabout. So by the time he crushed the guy, he was quite far away from the other vehicles. And I remember him telling me it was the fright of my life. I feared for my life that day because there weren't very many people around. But since the guy in the car came out of the car and started a row with that armored mini tank or transport vehicle that had stopped to check if everyone was okay, he'd started a row with them. People flocked from everywhere. Like he said, I never saw that. And he told me the whole Legion team, they packed up into the vehicle in a minute. In a few seconds, they realized people coming from everywhere with stones and sticks.
Yeah.
And so they closed everything, and he ended up on the top of the roof of the vehicle with people all around, like pushing and moving the vehicle and stuff. And I remember him telling me, if I'd shot one shot
Right.
at these guys, I would not have had enough bullets for every one of them.
Right. Right.
And he had his whole kit. And it's like, if I shoot one of them, I'm dead because they'll swarm me.
Right.
So many of them. And in a sec, they came out of nowhere. Like the row attracted everyone. Everyone started swarming the vehicle. And he said, I was so impressed. I knew if I couldn't shoot, I had my gun and I kind of, was pushing people away. But I know I would shoot one bullet if I was dead.
And that problem often gets compounded. It's like you said earlier, how insurgents hide within the civilian population. That if you get one person in that crowd that actually starts shooting at them, how do you identify that person? How do you eliminate that person? How do you protect yourself without it becoming an international incident?
Louis, let's. I mean, it sounds like you definitely got your feet wet on this first deployment. Walk us into deployment number 2. What was the mission you were going into this time? What are some of the high points that you recall from that deployment?
I mix missions up from different deployments.
Between 2 and 3,
so, I kind of mixed them up. I remember this one mission. It was kind of like this first one in the forest, but it was very rough. we had kind of the same situation where we were called upon this small group of guys under the forest, and so same kind of situation where they in broad daylight we were sent in helos onto this group of men in the forest. And I remember first time I had a really strong encounter with this, I kind of I was pumped and I was excited and stuff. By the time I got to this one, I kind of my mind had changed. I felt we were maybe gonna run out of luck, and maybe one day I was gonna get shot at the end. So I don't know if you know what I mean. It's when you go through a few battles like that. Well, not battles, but they're firefights.
Sure.
You feel untouched. You're like, all right, I'm invincible actually. And then arrives a stage where you see hang on, am I really invincible, or am I just going to run out of luck? I've been lucky up to now, and now I'm going to run out of luck.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that mission was kind of like that. I kind of felt, we're running into something that's going to be very rough, and this time maybe someone's gonna die on this one or be injured. So yeah, it was very stressful, and it was kind of like last time we arrived on the ground, and very fast we got engaged in these bushy forests that are very rough for infantry because you can't see very far. And I remember very well being fixed in the middle of the forest by this one guy, and he got maybe 20 of us in the forest, 2 teams, and he held us off for I don't know how much time. I don't know, it was maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. He held us off, like this one guy, and I still don't know to this day how he did it. He was in a bush, and he started shooting at us, and we were taking in turns between the teams on raiding his position. So at one stage we'd stop because we understood he was shooting at us, but same time as the other story I was telling you about, we couldn't see very well from where he was shooting, but we know it was very close. But this time we couldn't see the fire from his gun, we couldn't see the dust and stuff, and so we stopped. And eventually we told the other team, like, we'd already killed 3 guys before that, so we were already, stressed and perspiring, and everything was very stressful. And I remember telling the other guy, all right, if you want to give it a try and raiding this position, go for it. And I remember them walking up, shooting everywhere, every bush, and walking back with the guy still there. And I was like, oh, this is going to be rough. So eventually, I remember this is one of my school book moments where I saw every caliber being shot at this guy. We shot him with 5.56, 7.62. We shot him with we swung loads of grenades at him. 40 millimeter. That's the day I discovered that outside it's crap. Inside it's great. Outside it's crap. And with the drone, not the drone, the Hilo 30 millimeter, sorry, from the drone, that didn't do it. And so at one stage I even thought, and we didn't do it, but I even thought of setting fire to the whole place. I was like, how long is this going to take? And eventually, I don't know how we got it, because we just shot everything we had, literally at this one guy. And it was, I got loads of lessons learned from this. I discovered that if you're well hidden and you're really well ambushed, you can stop 20 guys and a helo and a drone and everything you want. And I remember this teammate, he was on my left. I had no grenades left, and I told him, you chuck your grenades, and he grabs his grenade and he sends it he was really excited to send his grenade, and he sends it to the other team. So the grenade lands live in the middle of the other team.
Oh
They have
no.
to fall back even more. So the grenades blows off, and then they come back. I remember this other guy he had from the other team. He decided that the 12 gauge was going to be his main weapon. I don't know why. I don't know. Sometimes when you spend too much time on standby, you end up having weird ideas.
It's an
like,
artistic choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Who are you to limit his creativity?
And so he decided 12 gauge was fine for outdoor combat, and so it was his main gun. And I remember him shooting everywhere, like going boom, 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 and stuff having no effect.
Right.
Absolutely no effect. And also, he thought it was a great idea not to have all his bullets in a pouch or something, but have them a bit everywhere, on these straps. So he could have them a bit everywhere, on his chest plate, on his arms, on his forearms, and he had them everywhere. But the result was that when they did the maybe second or third attempt of going up to this guy and running back, eventually he didn't run out of ammunition, but he had very few left, because from running up and running back, they all popped out from the straps. And so they were all over the place.
But they look great in photos, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the photos, they look great. He had them everywhere. It was absolutely ridiculous. When we did the BDA, I was like, oh, God, they shot a lot of ammunition. And I was picking them up. I was like, this is full. Oh, and this is full. Oh, and this is full. But anyway, so yeah, it was a funny story. And we ended up on a very dramatic situation on this one, because I remember after dealing with these guys, there were a bit less, maybe less than 10 guys. The very last one was a kid, and he was a kid, but I was obsessed with this last one because we knew he was hiding at the very end of the area, this bushy area, and he wasn't moving, and I suppose I was kind of scared and also, or maybe very, very cautious on this last one, because he wasn't shooting at us. And I knew he was there because we'd seen him. We'd seen him maneuver behind his teammates. And since he wasn't shooting at us, I just thought, he's waiting for us. And he has this belt, his exploding belt on him, or suicide vest on him. And I was thinking, what do we do? Like, do we... I had all these questions going on.
Sure.
As we were slowly, moving on to him, I was like, what's going to happen? Is he going to blow up? What do I do if he blows up? How much time do I have, to extract people from here? And, we think about your 10 minutes platinum, golden hour, how far am I from And so I'm thinking about all this, and at the same time, we're shooting everywhere. I remember the tension was as high as I've ever experienced it, and we'd had so many encounters, close call encounters, that I remember guys that were on my team that were known to be kind of cold-blooded and very, that had a very even temperament. They would start shooting at all the bushes.
Yeah.
Like at literally all the bushes.
Yeah.
I would come across an area, they'd go boom, 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 boom. Next area, boom, 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 boom. Every bush. And so that's when I realized, we were all in the same state. We're all amped up. And so we arrive at this last guy, and we know he's here. And eventually we run up onto him. And I'm thinking, what do we do? And we see he has this. We discover as we were moving around to him, I'm breaking this down into sequences, but the whole movement took maybe a few seconds. But everything was very clear in my mind, and I can break down the way we walked up to him, we moved around, we shot him because he had a gun laying on his lap, and as we move around, because we can only see the bottom of him. As we move around, we see he's showing his hands to us. And I come across his gaze, and it's a kid, like 15 years old. And I see him, and he's kind of imploring him. He's kind of imploring. He's, he's pitiful. And he's looking at us with his hands up, and he's not full of blood yet, but I know he's wounded, and it's not gonna be long. And I'm kind of, do we finish him? And there's this big question, you're like facing him, and he's looking at you, and I'm like, So eventually, we jump onto him, and we make sure he doesn't have a suicide vest. So I kind of grab his torso and try and feel his shape, and I feel nothing. So I'm like, like this is a relief. This is probably the last guy, and there's no suicide vest. I'm like, we survived this. This is fantastic. And I put my hands out. I'm like, he's wounded. There's loads of blood on my hands. So I'm like, he's not going to make it. And that's where there's a whole situation that comes up where we're three of us on this guy. After we've searched him, I tell one of my mates, like, yeah, go on. No, at the time I was team leader, so yeah, one of my mates, but one of the operators, I go like, go lay a strap on him or a tourniquet or something, just, what I say is, we say to technic him. It's
like a tourniquet. A tourniquet.
Yeah, but we say just deal with him instead of saying we deal when it's medical. We say technique. We say do your technique on him.
Okay.
Basically, so I go do your technique on him. But anyway, I'm saying that so that the guys have a clear conscience, and when he dies, they say at least we've tried something. And he's dead, but at least we've tried something. But what happens is this senior NCO, that's the CO's, as in jihadist situation, he's with the CO, the guy that works with the CO, comes up to me, and at that stage, I'm team leader, and he comes up to me and says, we're not dealing with him, leave him. And I'm like, I left two of my guys on him, and the area's clear. I knew this is the end of the area. After that, it was desert, like it was open right. area. So I knew there wasn't any danger close. There could have been further on, but I knew there was a helo round, two helos round, and they were looking ahead of us. So I knew the area was under control. And so he kind of was slightly behind the action, so he didn't really see what was going on. And when he reached me, he was like taking decisions very, very fast. And I knew he wasn't clear with the tactical situation. So I just tell him, I'm not leaving that guy. He's been he's been dealt with, so I'm leaving him there. So we get into a bit of a row, you see, because I feel, and might not be right, but I feel he wants to be, the big dog saying, oh no, we can leave that guy. He's an enemy. Let him bleed out. It's fine. I'm like, whatever, you haven't dealt with this guy eyes in the eyes, and you haven't had his blood on his hand, and he's a kid, and you're like, at least give him a chance.
Yeah.
I'm saying that also, and at the same time, I have in mind that, as I was saying, we're very lightweight here. We don't have very much gear. We have one medic and one nurse, so they have gear on them. But I know they only have a certain amount of kits, and so if we keep this guy alive, they're going to break out a kit for him. So that's another kit. If anything happens afterwards,
right,
I'm not going to have I am not going to have for one of my teammates or one of my operators. So it's also a kind of hard decision because I started dealing with this guy. I could have very well left him and said, right, leave him there. He'll pass out and eventually die from blood loss. But I said, deal with him and put a tourniquet on, and it's fine. But what happened was the nurse rushed out from the bushes, and he grabbed a hold of the situation, and he actually saved the guy. And so this was kind of, I didn't expect that, because by seeing the guy, I just thought, there was at least a liter of blood out. He bled out at least a liter, and I was like, he's minutes, if not seconds, away from passing out. And the guy actually saved him, to my surprise, and so that created kind of an innuendo, because the guys afterwards were like, "Why did we save that guy?" Like, he had a PKM on his legs.
Right.
He obviously had took shot at us, and you gave orders to save him.
Right.
And at the same time, I was like, I wasn't just gonna let him bleed out with nothing else to do, because we were actually going to just sit there and wait, and we're just going to wait with him at, there. I mean, there are situations where we acted differently because in the middle of combat, it's the middle of combat.
Yeah.
Right.
People die. It's the way it is.
Right.
But this was the end of an action, and I knew it was the end, and it was the end. And so my decision was kind of hard, and at the same time, I feel it was the right decision. But I understand that people said, I wouldn't. Even now today, I talk about this situation in the book, and some of the guys, some of ex Commandos, and sometimes discuss this, and they go to me very simply, like, I would have left them bled out, and
Yeah.
I understand totally the decision.
Yeah.
It was a hard one for me, and an interesting one also as a human. Like, it educated me a lot.
I mean, you've both between like the desire to set fire to the area that the guy was in and this situation. It's interesting that war movies are interesting, and there tends to be like a black and white in them, but there are so many nuanced decisions in combat that people who either, and like you say, some of the guys would have said, I would have left him, and you don't fault them for that. Nobody would fault for that.
No.
People listening to this might say, oh, you said he was a kid, but kids get recruited into combat. It's horrible. It's despicable, but a kid can kill you just as easily as an adult if they're using a PKM or an AK or something else like that. And now it's...
I think it was a good decision to make, though, in the end. I mean, if you were still in combat, it is what it is. You got a job to do.
But you knew you were at the end of your limit of advance. Yeah.
Well, it was a bit of a. I took a chance also, because I'm not I can't see in the future.
Right.
Right.
I could have been wrong.
Right.
Like, it might have been another situation, and we might have been projected to a very similar situation. I might have got wounded in the team, and maybe we didn't have enough kits for him in the end. So I would have saved an enemy fighter.
Right.
And one of my guys might have bled out, and that would have been my responsibility and my fault.
Right.
Louis, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit. You mentioned to me that there was an operation you were a part of where you had to respond to an American mission. And kind of follow on to the aftermath. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your role in that and how it unfolded.
Yeah, it was a mission where American troops got ambushed, and there were Rangers, a small team of Rangers that were with local army.
Special forces.
Special forces?
Yeah.
Okay. And but the Americans were Rangers, right?
No, the Americans were special forces, Green Berets.
Oh, they were special forces.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
sorry. But anyway, so they got ambushed, and we were called onto the rescue mission. It was funny because I remember being on a French base nearby, and seeing a helicopter from another unit facing ours taking off in a rush. And I remember running to the CO going, where are we going? And he told me, we're going nowhere, nothing's going on. And I'm like, something's going on. Because the unit facing us is moving. So eventually picks up the phone, makes a few phone calls, and next thing we know, we're in the helo, leaving for we don't know where, we don't know how much time, we have no idea, and we're just flying for 7 hours in the helo with a refuel in the middle of nowhere. I don't even know where we were. Like I know we crossed borders. No, I didn't even know we crossed borders. We went from one
Holy
country to
shit.
another, and I didn't know where we were. We landed in an area. My CEO was too busy on the radio, and I was with the rest of the team, and we were like in the middle of nowhere in a kind of a camp with locals, and it was maybe it was the middle of the night, and I remember very well. We didn't have anything to eat or to drink, and we're just laying in the dirt on the ground waiting for orders. And these two Americans came out of nowhere, CIA guys with a pickup, and briefed us on their warehouse. And so we eventually to where their warehouse was, and so we eventually followed them up to the warehouse, which is the shittiest place, shittiest outpost I'd ever seen in my life. It was it was pieces of wood stuck together with a kind of a metal roofing. It was crap, and I remember very well walking into what was the kitchen, and also where they'd stored all the MREs, and seeing this 50-year-old normal-looking white guy curved up on the floor, sleeping with no blanket, no mattress, nothing, just on the floor of the kitchen, and going, "Oh, that's awkward," and crossing, going to the next room, which was the CO, where everything was laid out, and the operation center, sorry, where everything was laid out with comms and a few computers. And I remember there was this spec ops guy that we had. I'd met on our base already. He was there also, and we're trying to realize what was going on. That's where I realized I changed countries, and eventually the guy from the kitchen came in, and I realized he was a helo pilot, a contractor from for the CIA, and so we were kind of settled there to organize and get organized on what we were going to do to retrieve this one missing spec op American, and the guys told us they'd managed to bring back most of the guys, apart from the guys that were dead from the ambush, and this one guy that was missing. And so we were very concerned for the guy that was missing. I saw the guys who came back from the ambush, and they were. I think two things struck me. The first one was the shock. I could read in their faces. They were like in a state of shock. They were staring at the ground all the time and kind of not, they were silent. They weren't talking, and you could feel the shock. And also, they had all volunteered to go on the rescue mission for this one guy. So, I was kind of taken aback. Like, these guys had just survived an ambush where they lost a few of their teammates, and they were back in the fight, and they were willing to go back immediately in the fight. I was like, what are these guys made of? And I remember also we had logistics problems and problems with Washington this time. We had the greens from Paris, but Washington, we didn't have the greens for everything. So we didn't have the green light for everything. So we figured we were better off taking 2 to 3 hours rest before we left in the very early morning for the rescue mission. And I remember they directed us to this temporary shelter where they had their bunk beds and stuff. And the guys from the Spec Ops went to bed, and so there were rooms left. They were empty, and we were looking for rooms to sleep in. And like we realized, they were the rooms of the guy that had just died or that were missing.
Oh, jeez.
And I remember very well the guys going, "No, we're not sleeping there." They closed the door, and we went to sleep on the floor in the shelter next door, because it sounded. It was this, like no one said anything, but we just felt, if this guy's dead, I'm out of respect, I'm not sleeping in his bed. Like I'm not touching his gear. His gear is staying there. If someone touches his gear, it's his teammates. I'm not going near this. So there was kind of this. Well, we didn't express it, but it was like,
Yeah.
It was kind of solemn. It was the middle of the night. We were starving. We didn't know where we were, and we were all very confused. We know why we were there and what we were going to do. That was perfectly clear. But in this situation, we're like, I'm better off sleeping on the ground than in a dead man's bed.
Mm.
So we went to the other shelter where we, I remember, we slept. It was fun in the end because, you kind of make a bit of these situations where there's a lot of drama, you kind of, you have to have a bit of humor to lighten things out. So we messed around in the shelter because it was so small, and we were maybe 7 of us or 8 of us on the team, and we were all cramped together, and so we were all stuck together to sleep, and we slept in our gear, and it was fine. We just had a few MREs, and it was fine. And the next morning, we're 2 to 3 hours later, we woke up, and it was still nighttime, I remember, and we took the helos, and we went to where the last where we had detected the last signal from the survival beacon the guys had on them.
The Blue Force tracker.
Yeah, Blue Force
Yep.
Strike. That's it. Yeah. And so the guys had the last position of that, and also they scanned the area, the drones that scanned the area to see if they could find human signs. So we had a few ideas of where to go. So we went onto the signal, and I remember the signal was very close to where the ambush had taken place. And during the ambush, I know French fighter jets had to do low pass flights on the area to get the enemies away, and the gunfight at the area. I don't think it's the fighter jets. I'm not sure about this, but I know shots were fired from both sides, of course, and it actually activated a local fire. So the forest was on fire. And by the time we reached there, there was a whole area that burnt out. And I remember very well, it was nighttime, and arriving at the area, and there were flames on the horizon. And we were searching for this guy with our NVG, just looking at the ground, just hovering around at the area with flames all around. It was kind of apocalyptic. It was really weird. And so we were all like, there were maybe 4 or 5 helos on the area, just hovering around, scanning everywhere. And eventually we jumped to another area. We didn't find anything. We jumped to another area where the drones thought they had identified a body. And so we landed there, and we started searching the whole of the area. We didn't find anything, unfortunately. And so eventually, yeah, we went back up. Went back up onto the helos. Went back to the outpost, and we got a call a few hours later from a local in a video. Oh no! Between times, we regrouped in a bigger French Air Force base in the area. And from there were loads of American special forces poured in, and they were, by the time we got there, there were maybe 100 extra American Special Forces.
Yeah, there's a whole JSOC package that deployed specifically to recover a missing American soldier. Yeah.
How many guys is that?
I'm
How
not
many
sure
people
exactly
is that?
how many, but like C-17s with helicopters and
Yeah,
operators
yeah,
like ready to roll.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing at least one or two American aircrafts, C-17s. Maybe I think it was two C-17s on the when we landed with the helo on the airfield. There were two C-17s at least, and maybe even extra. I don't know, but I remember those two. And anyway, so yeah, we were grouped there, and I remember uh, planning out to raid the nearby village, the village that was closest to the ambush. And that's where things kind of got off hand because the Americans obviously were super eager to get the guy back,
Yeah.
and we were there to help, and we were glad to chip in. So I remember the briefing with all the guys, and so all these big American special forces in the room, and we were there also. And I remember this one guy, probably CIA guy, but I don't know why I remember him. He had this look. He was with dark, curly black hair, and he was he had jungle boots and jeans and a shirt, and he had a plate carrier with the way Afghans made homemade plate carriers. He had one of those, which above it, his kit was strapped on above it. So there's two different items, and he had this roller helmet. So it wasn't, it was a plastic helmet. It wasn't ballistic. It was like an obscure helmet, but plastic. And he had this gun. It was a 14-inch, probably 7.62 with double scopes. I remember very well, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a bit of an Indiana Jones." It had this Indiana Jones look, and I found it very exotic. I didn't know who he is. Probably a CIA guy or contractor for some unit. I don't know. Anyway, it was fun to see all these guys assembled together. And so briefing took place, and the briefing was simple. It was, we're gonna raid the whole of the village. And I was like, okay, fine. What does my team do? And they give us the area. We're supposed every unit had, one, we call it a fuseau in French. It's a stripe, probably a corridor.
Like a yeah.
Kind of a corridor
sector.
where sector. And so they gave me my sector, and I started counting the houses in the sector. And I remember it was over 100 houses in the sector. And I'm like, we're just the 10 of us, and we'd have over 100 houses to deal with. And the next door team in the next sector had the exact same amount of houses, over 100. And so I was thinking, how could this go right?
No, we lost Louis again.
We did this on purpose, and this is the thrill of live TV. But we did this on purpose to keep everybody in suspense. I know I am.
Yeah, no, this is just the reality of doing these things live, and that we're live streaming it. So
fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah, exactly. We'll I'm sure Louis will dial back in a second. It's not his fault. So yeah, again, next Friday is going to be Nicholas Moore, who served in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and then we're going to have an extra episode on October 3rd with James Laporta, who is a former Marine and a investigative journalist with the Associated Press. And then we have Tim Weiner coming on the show. He is also a journalist. He's the guy who wrote Legacy of Ashes, sort of seminal history of the Central Intelligence Agency. I read the book. It's pretty fascinating. We'll have him here in studio to talk about the book and some other projects he has going on. Louis is just dialing back in here.
Louis,
you got us. Okay.
You kept us in suspense.
Yeah.
You said, "How can this go right?"
Right. So you're talking about how you had your sector, the guys to your side had their sector, and each one had like 100 houses in it.
Yeah. And so I'm just realizing, although we have helos and stuff, this is gonna be very rough. Like, how are we going to do this? And eventually, the mission is turned off, and because we've all died probably on this, but so yeah, the mission is turned off, and they say we got intel. Apparently, in the village, in this very village, one of the guys is an informant for an agency, and they got the information that they found the American. And so we're all very excited, and we're like, great, let's go get him. And so we hop onto the helos, we head for the village. We do a refueling en route. And during the refueling of the helos, there were a group of Americans there that had organized the stop with it was in the middle of the desert, so there were just a few trucks, fuel trucks, gathered together, and a pickup with a few Americans in it. And so we did the refueling, and the Americans are settled there. And we start chatting with them while they refuel, and at some stage, a guy walks up to us, and it was this team leader from the Spec Ops we knew from the base. Comes up to us, says, "Guys, we're sorry. Plans have changed. We're still going to collect this American, but he's dead." Yeah, so we're really sorry, but that's how it is. And I remember all these big dudes, big beards, with all the tattoos and looking very manly, and they all started crying and hugging.
Wow.
So yeah, it was, and we were like kind of in shock, really sad, really, because we were looking forward to collect this guy, because we were thinking of him all the time, because he was having a real rough time. We didn't know whether he'd been captured or not. So yeah, so everyone kind of broke down, and so we carried on, and eventually we just did the air support for the Americans that landed, and we saw them collect the body and lay out the flag and bring him back into the helo and back to his family, I guess. So yeah, we just did the escort. We were there all along just to do the safety of the helo, and voila. So yeah, sad story.
Yeah, it is a sad story. And not to put like a happy bow on it or anything like that, but I think it's important to point out that the incredible lengths that we will go to repatriate an American soldier, and we were not going to leave that guy behind. That soldier fought till the end, and it's very sad that we were not able to bring him back alive. But that all of these soldiers were immediately launched from the United States, that we called on our allies, and that the French were able to help us out immediately. It all says a lot about the coalition that we formed, and about the bond that we have, the promise that we have to our teammates, that we are not going to leave an American soldier, dead or alive. We are not going to leave them out there on the battlefield. And so I really appreciate what you did, Louis, and what those operators did out there that day to bring that soldier back home.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate we just didn't get there in time. That's my only regret, really.
There's nothing you could have done. He was killed in the battle. It's
killed in the battle. Okay.
Yeah,
it's
the fault of none of you. It's out of our hands, right?
Yeah. But anyway, that's one of the sad missions I have, amongst others. But I enjoyed working with the Americans, and I was really astonished by the courage of the teammates that went right back into battle, ready to fight. To recover their teammates. That was really, really a lesson for us. Like, to see that although they'd lost, they'd lost some of their teammates, they were back immediately, and with no questions asked. They were just waiting to go back onto the helo, back into the fight. So that was pretty amazing. Yeah, bit of a lesson for us.
The last thing to really get on, I know we've kept you incredibly late, especially late your time in France. But you were deployed to the Middle East, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that deployment differed and what your mission was like there.
My deployment to the Middle East wasn't very. I didn't find it very interesting. It wasn't as interesting as we had in Africa, really, because it wasn't very. It was a move. It wasn't a moving battleground.
Mm-hmm.
Things didn't move very much, and so it wasn't very interesting. Also, there was a lot of IEDs involved, and that's something I don't appreciate very much. I mean, it's not that I don't appreciate, but it's I hate them. I hate that kind of conflict where you blow up on IEDs. It's just hell. There was funny stories though. I remember one of my friends on another mission, same area. He when he was driving his SUV, these big Toyota armored SUVs, and I remember him just he told me he drove on the road and he saw something weird in the dirt, like something was emerging from the dirt. He just gave a small swerve to the steering wheel, and so he just drove around, and it was like, nah, that was weird. And he eventually called the guys behind him and told them to stop, and he drove on a little more and said, listen guys, there's something weird on the road. Eventually the fusing team came along. It was this big tank, with the rolling thing, and so he eventually, when they reached the area when he saw this weird thing, he didn't drive on because he felt something was weird. The tank blew up. Well, the thing blew up just in front of the tank, and there was actually an IED. He just drove around. So yeah, no, I don't really like that kind of area. No.
I have some questions here from the viewers. I'll try to get through them pretty quick.
Yeah.
Danny asked, did you conduct joint ops with the Foreign Legion, particularly, and I apologize for my mispronunciation, Deuxième Rep?
Deuxième Rep. I know Americans are obsessed with Foreign Legion. I don't know why. I don't know why. Well, I know they're great guys. Like I know they're elite troops, and some of my mates from the Commandos came from Foreign Legion, but I never got to work with Foreign Legion because Foreign Legion is not special operations. They don't work with special operations. We work essentially with special operations teams, and so we never get to work with these guys. I got to train with some of them. Like you get to train with some of them and to meet some, because we do we jump from the same aircrafts and we do stuff together in same areas, but we don't like deploy together because we're not meant to work together. Although the GCP, and especially the Deuxième Rep, which is among all the regiments probably one of the best, if not the best, and the GCP is the small elite of 30 guys in the regiment.
That's what Joel's Brothers was in.
Yeah. Do the missions, like, does the French government use the Foreign Legion? Is their mission set completely different than the rest of the French military?
Not today. Not today. It used to be, and it might be in the near future. Who knows? But they're not. They don't have a different set of missions today than they have the same missions as the army, as conventional army. They are conventional army today. The only thing is they were used by the French. It's an old tradition we have. It goes out hundreds of years ago. It really the origin, the genesis of Foreign Legion is mercenaries working for the King of France. He just brought them in and called them. They were all strangers, like they were all foreign people,
Right.
and they just said, right, we're taking you in now. You can stay foreign, but we're taking you into our army, which was very conventional, before the 20th century. Yeah. And also there was a very strong use of them after Second World War, where a lot of German soldiers fled from Germany and were brought into the Foreign Legion. We used these Foreign Legion, these German soldiers in the Foreign Legion. I have loads of stories from these Legion guys telling me that all the instructors they used to have, the old guys, they all used to talk German in between them. Like they all used to talk German together. They all used to be loads of SS guys. And so they trained the Legion like they used to train the SS units or the conventional German army.
Yeah.
So that's also what's quite rich. What's interesting with the Legion is that they get the best of all the guys they get to gather.
Yeah, there is an American fascination with the Legion for sure.
Dave, if you pull up the questions on
I got 'em.
Patreon, please. No, the Patreon questions.
Oh, the Patreon question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Danny asks, have you ever served with any graduates of École Polytechnique?
École Polytechnique? Yeah, I have, yeah. That's our MIT.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, yeah.
Scott says, saw a video that the French military is able to get a lot for how little they spend. Any insight into how they do this and the pros and cons?
Yeah, well, French budget has dwindled in the last year, has diminished a lot. And the last year, the defense budget has diminished a lot. We still managed to keep a kind of a baseline for the budget that's quite high in comparison with other European countries because we're still waging war, because we're still sending people out to Mali, to Middle East, and elsewhere. So that helps us. That helps the Ministry of Defense to justify the budgets. Of course, that's how it works. But then I have to admit that French military are particularly good for human intelligence, and I'm going to be perfectly frank in what I'm going to say because it's going to concern the Americans. We work very well with the Americans in Middle East and Africa. Why? Because that's my opinion, and please forgive me, it's offensive, but it's my opinion. The French are very good at gathering human intelligence because they have a way of dealing with populations that's very they mix very easily. The French mix very easily with local populations. Like for instance, in the French bases in Africa, you have every Thursday you have locals that come into the base to sell artifacts, to sell stuff they make. All the locals can come into the hospital to get fixed. So the whole hospital is almost open to all the population locally. So these are little things that help us mix with the population, and also where, as I said earlier, all these African areas, even Middle East, are areas where we've hung out for years, if not hundreds of years. And so people get to know the area and so are used to people. And so that's how we managed to gather human intelligence very well. The Americans can't get that as well.
It's hard, yeah. Because
Americans stick out.
Yeah.
Usually. Like you can tell American in an airport, you can tell who's American. usually. And so they stick out, and they're not very good at mixing with populations. And so where that comes out handy is that French get human resources quite easily, whereas Americans get technical intelligence, technical resources very handy. They have them very handy because NSA, because all these intelligence services that work very well for the Americans because it's very technical, and we don't have them as well. Ours are far way less developed than the Americans have them. I don't know if I'm clear in what.
It's the cultural efficacy, really, that you're so embedded in so many. They call it France Afrique for a reason.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which leads into John Pierre has a question. What are your impressions of French intelligence? There seems to have been shortfalls, particularly highlighted during the climax of ISIS's reign of terror. I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. Maybe he's talking about Beslan.
Oh yeah, no, Beslan is in Russia, no.
The
massacre of Beslan is in
the schools.
Is that not the? Yes,
the schoolhouse
with the hostage.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. What's
okay.
the massacre that I'm talking about that took place?
Oh yeah, it's Bataclan.
Thank you.
Bataclan. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Now these are two different issues because just like in America, you have the FBI for domestic threats, and you've CIA for external threats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, France is kind of orchestrated the same way. Like you have DGSI, that's for the interior. I stands for interior, and DGSE, E stands for exterior. So it's quite easy to remember. And both of those services work in intelligence to protect French people and French interests. The problem is they don't communicate very well because historically, that's a complicated issue, but intelligence services don't work together because if they work together, they can also become a bit of a threat for
it diminishes their value. Yeah,
and also diminishes their value. And if you have different services, it encourages in emulation.
Yeah.
So it helps them fight to get the best intel.
Yeah.
And so you have a number of services in France, and they all fight to get the best intel. And every morning, the president has his briefing. And I know that in the briefing, all the services are there, and they all fight. They have a small box of information they can hand over. And I think there are, in every morning briefing, there are 3 boxes with one box boxed in red, which is the main information you have to remember today. And they all fight to have their information boxed in red in the morning briefing of the president. I know it's a fight that happens every morning. And that's very important to understand. So it helps having the best information possible because they all fight to get the best intel possible. But on the downside is that don't communicate very much.
Yeah.
Because communicating is giving intel, and intel is their main resource.
Right.
Like intelligence services live around the intel. Like it's not about budget, it's not about the number of people they have, it's not about the actions they've led. It's about who has the best intel at the best moment. That's the main goal. And so if they share it, then they're useless. I've seen it before. I've seen services fight to steal intel from one service to the other, like in a good way. Like it's a fair fight, but it does happen.
Well, I mean, we I don't want to say we had because I don't know if we still have, but like we have the Directorate of National Intelligence for exactly that same reason, because of 9/11, because there was not intelligence sharing going on. Like it's
since
people
9/11, they're trying to mix. Like I know they've set up organizations for the different agencies to talk together about these domestic and foreign threats that are sometimes the same. Like just like for Bataclan, as you said, Bataclan is a terrorist threat that was domestic, but that was organized from the outside.
Right.
So you have to identify outside what's going to happen inside,
Right.
and you have to follow it up as it goes inside. And I know that the GSC they can't work on. There's loads of problems like legal problems, and it's the same for Americans. I know.
Yeah.
It's that you can't. DGSC cannot work on French people in France.
Right. The separation
They're not
of
allowed.
church and state.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same for the
exactly.
CIA.
The same with CIA. Yeah.
So that's a bit of an issue because they can't have the follow up. Like as soon as if they find a French guy training with ISIS, let's say in Syria, and they find him outside, they follow him up. If he switches and let's say they lose him, and he goes by Turkey and enters the European Union, and he ends up in France, they don't have the means because they're not allowed. They don't have the means to intercept that guy in France.
Right.
They have to hand over to the GSI the whole package.
Right.
This is where he's from. This is where he trained. This is what he did.
Right.
And they don't like that because
Right.
that's handing over files.
Right.
And they don't hand over files.
Right. They can't just say, you guys need to watch them. They need to give them why they need to watch them. They need to give them the entire package.
The whole story.
Yeah.
And they don't like that.
Yeah.
What they like to do is give orders.
Yeah.
Say the DGSC will say to DGSI, look after for this guy. The DGSI will say, why? And they'll say, none of your business.
Right.
And they're like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm not looking after this guy.
Yeah.
Danny asks, why do so many U.S. military terms have French etymology? For example, battalion, regiment, revelry, sergeant, lieutenant, etc. You have any thoughts on that, Louis?
Absolutely. Because France ruled the world.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah.
I think the French influence in their support for the American Revolution and Lafayette. Probably I don't know. I'm not.
That's Louis XIV. It's Louis XIV, Louis XIV.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that did most of it, like did 90% of what we know today. And French, like the way Americans weaponize the dollar.
With
the
Bretton
dollar
Woods.
is a weapon.
Yeah.
It's used as a weapon by the American government. Well, the same way they use culture, like with Hollywood. The same way they use the language. Language is part of culture, and you can weaponize it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know France in the 17th century, they weaponized the language and made it the main language everyone had to use. That's why there are so many French words in the English language. And it's not just in the military, like it's in everything. Like a lot of, they're two totally different languages.
Right.
Like it's a Latin and Germanic language, but English is Germanic and French is Latin. But there still is loads of words. I know to looked it up before. I don't have the numbers anymore, but I know loads of words from English language come from French. And the same way today, loads of French people are talking with English words in their everyday life.
Yeah.
Because English is being weaponized.
Yeah. French, I don't know if it still is considered, but for the longest time, it was considered the language of diplomacy. Like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But
it still is in theory.
It is.
Yeah.
It
It
is.
is in theory. Like in United Nations, I think the official international language is French.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get to learn fun French words in political science. Rapprochement. These types of terms.
Very good. Very good.
Jackson asks, what was your impression of 1 RPIMA SAS GIGN in Action Division? Is there not a rivalry between the units?
Of course there is. How can there be?
Right.
There always is. Like the same way there's rivalry in different units in
our units.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There is everywhere. All these units are made of guys that have character. Because to go in a Spec Ops unit, you have to have character to pass through the tests. To survive in a group, you have to have a bit of character. And if you have character, you create rivalry. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Dave, what do you got there?
So, Isaac, I'm going to ask two of your questions. Let me choose two of them. Did Louis ever encounter a truly random operators in Sahel like the Wagner Group, Australian PMCs? Anybody? Were there people out there that were just kind of out on the fringe?
No, not that I can remember. No.
And with the withdrawal from Afghanistan has had strong impact on veterans in America. How has it affected French spec ops?
This is
This
a good question to bring up your post-service life with veteran service organizations too.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are questioning today the government and the politics we're leading, because the same way you're leaving, the Americans are leaving Afghanistan. We've left Afghanistan 10 years before, but we're leaving Sahel today, and we're leaving all we've done over there to make the area secure. So there's the same kind of disgust in a lot of military people, especially those that have lost, family and friends. It's particularly harsh on them, and so yeah, that's very hard. But yeah, so sorry, but you were saying, yeah, Jack, about the veterans organization. That's what I do today. Indeed, yeah, I work I work for a veterans organization that works for all the young new veterans that France is having at the moment. Since France has had a long tradition of veteran organizations since because of Afghanistan, not Afghanistan, but because of Algeria and war and the China war. And we're going to renew this today with all the guys that did Afghanistan, Mali, and Syria, and all those areas.
Did when Americans came home from Vietnam, they didn't have a great reception. The public was generally, in general, against the war, and not just the war, but the soldiers involved with the war. Did French soldiers in Indochina, did France have the same sort of reaction to them, or was it viewed differently?
It's very peculiar because France has had a long history of combatants, of soldiers. France has had any number of wars on its ground and also outside in colonies, and so it's not new for France. So there wasn't any trauma with war, but there was, well, to my mind, there was and I think you talked about this with the Canadian interviewer. Yeah, you had the Canadian
the JTF2 operator.
Yeah, and he talked about this because the Foreign Legion was.
Oh, that was Joel Struthers. I'm sorry, that was Joel.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay,
yeah.
But when, for instance, for Algeria, there was this. I think it was the same for Indochina, and it was the same for Vietnam. There were two wars going on. There was the war, the physical war going on. There was a guerrilla war that was terrible in all these countries, that was led by communists or Islamists, depending on where you're talking. But it was always the same war. It was guerrilla war. And there was a second war going on every time. And that took place in America or in France. And that was a war on the public opinion.
Right.
It was a war on the population, to tell the population that the war it was leading was wrong, was dreadful, was horrible, it shouldn't do it, etc., etc., etc. It's kind of a more psychological warfare, really. And I know very well the case of Algeria because I studied it a bit. And Indochina is the same. The Algerian war was military won by the French military. Like they won a guerrilla warfare, which was maybe the only one that was won in the 20th century. The problem was, since the enemies of France that were, we call them Algerian rebels, since they understood they were losing this war, they used psychological warfare on the French population in France to make them feel the war that was waged in Algeria was unfair, was horrible, and should not happen, and unjust on the population. And that's where the politics kicked in and obeyed the public opinion. Well, not obeyed, it went in the same direction as the public opinion. And in the end said, Algeria is going back to the Algerians and we're leaving them independent. That, and among other reasons, because it was also in the 60s where all the colonies were becoming independent also. So it's not the only reason, but it was one of the reasons that helped the Algerian rebels to get through, was that psychological warfare that helped them. And it was the same in Indochina.
Yeah. I mean, we see it now even. I mean, there's a massive, and at least in America, there's like an accusation against soldiers like waging war against brown people. It's like, well, we fought beside those people who wanted to keep their countries free. Like, it wasn't just, this nationalistic kind of, let's just tell these people what to believe.
You got any more Patreon questions?
No more Patreon questions, but something has come up in the chat that we have to address. And it's come up a number of times, and people want to know, are you really French or are you an Irishman on the run?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I am from the IRA, but I've been trying to hide this for years.
But a number of people have mentioned that your accent sounds very Irish.
Yeah, I might have an Irish origin. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, just a scooch. Yeah.
Well, Louis, you're awesome, man, because you're over in Europe, and we have kept you up way past your bedtime. And
no problem. It was a great pleasure talking to you guys.
I really appreciate it, man. And this was like an amazing, eye-opening interview, and I think our audience is also going to be similarly illuminated by it. So, really appreciate your time on a Friday evening, and we hope to talk to you again real soon. And any final things? I mean, your book, the link is down in the description for our French readers out there.
Hey, and if you're an English reader and you've ever thought about trying to learn French, this is the perfect book for you. It's written by a military man, so you can handle it.
Don't read French, you will.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to plug, Louis? The not-for-profit veterans organization you work for? Anywhere you want to direct people?
No, not yet, because we're still building the organization. Okay. So it's going to be set up soon, but no, not yet.
Once that's up, please let us know, and we will gladly plug it. We would love to.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis. Have a good night.
Louis, thanks so much.
All right, thank you very much, guys. It was great talking to you.
We'll see all you guys next Friday with Nicholas Moore. So take care.